and welcome to another episode of Board Game Tutorials. I'm Cymrych Hughs from Blue Hand Gamers, and today we're going over Fallout. Now, Fallout is inspired by the Bethesda-made video game. This is a 1 to 4 player game. It is competitive for the most part, but you can kind of work together. There are 5 unique characters you can choose from, all with their own starting abilities and their unique traits. And then there are several scenarios you can choose from. Alright, so the big thing about Fallout is you have these agenda cards. These agenda cards show what faction you're vying for and how to score points based on that faction. You're allowed to have up to 4 agenda cards. If you ever gain more than that, you can discard down to 4. And you can have the same ones. In the rule book, it shows you have a specific number of influence you have to score in order to be the winner. Now you're going to have to go out and do some side quests to gain more influence cards, the agenda cards, in order to find more ways of scoring influence at the end of the game. At the same time, you also want to perform your main quest, because each main quest has 2 different ways you can go. Now, as you can see, we have the top part of the main quest that if you perform this action, it'll give you 2 points of the shield icon. And then if you perform the bottom half, it'll give you 2 points in the star icon. Now every scenario card has 2 different factions, and each faction will have some form of defender or soldier for that faction. On the side here, it'll tell you, in this situation, when you're in the green, yellow, or orange, every faction has an unknown, an X and a Y. Depending on where that faction token is listed, will tell you the difference in those stats. Such as the railroad, once they're in the green, their X equals 1 value. And then the shield, the Y equals a ranged icon. Now when you complete a quest, sometimes there'll be rewards such as XP, caps, or loot. Other times it'll tell you to add cards to a certain deck, or it'll tell you to stage new quests. Now when you're asked to add a new card, you find the card with the same back as the deck. You take the new card, and then you'll take an equal number of players, in this case 4, shuffle these 5 cards, and then place them directly on top. Now when adding a card, it is always the added card plus off of the top of that deck equal number of players in the game. When told to stage a new quest, you'll take the library, find the number, and then place that quest so that all players can read it and see that it is an active and available quest. Now I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but I think it might be easiest if we see how it all plays out. There's only 2 phases to this game. There's the player's turns, and then there's the enemy activation. So when it's your turn, let's go over what different actions you can perform. First and foremost, let's go over move. Now when the Wastelander wants to move, they're going to announce that as an action, and let's say in a pool, they have now 2 movement points that they are allowed to spend. This movement is allowed to be interrupted and reacquired at a later time. You can spend both of your actions on movement in order to move a grand total of 4 points. But if you want to move one, perform your second action, and then move your remaining one, you are completely allowed to do that. All of the locations have white borders symbolizing spaces. When making a move action, you gain your 2 movement points and can move 2 spaces bordered by those white lines. Next, we have the Explore action. Now, when your character is directly next to an unexplored map tile, you are allowed to perform an exploration. So using one of your actions, you simply flip that tile over. Orient the arrow so that the arrows are all pointing the same way across the entire map. Now this exploration will show new areas you can explore. It could bring in new enemies. If ever there is an enemy symbol, you will immediately populate it based off of the 5 different enemy types. You'll simply take the top one, flip it over, and place it directly on the new zone. Next, let's go over Fight. Now when you fight, you have a few things to look at. One is their level. It can be either 1, 2, or 3. The next thing is the VATS targeting. When you roll dice, this is the targeting you have to roll to do damage to this creature. A creature's health points are equal to its level, which is also the amount of experience points you'll gain if you defeat it. If you do not defeat it, it will stay where it is, unless otherwise told, and will regain all of its full health for fighting in the future. And then many creatures also have abilities. A loot bag will indicate that you gain loot if you defeat it. An upward arrow indicates that whether you enter its space or it enters your space, it is aggressive and will automatically trigger a fight that does not consume one of your actions. In this case, the Mr. Handy has a ranged, which means it can attack from 1 space away. Now, if you are ever attacking, whether it is you or an enemy, if there is a ranged icon and the other figure does not have a ranged icon, and they are in fact attacking from a range, then they automatically gain 1 hit. But ranged things that are attacking from the same space do not gain that benefit. Also, if a player is attacking with a ranged weapon against something that is also ranged with a ranged weapon, neither of them will gain the ranged bonus hit. Now we go on to the fun part. When we go into combat, we'll take all 3 of the VATS dice and roll all 3 of them. Now the VATS symbols indicate where you are able to hit on the enemy. Since the Mr. Gutsy we're fighting is weak to arms, and it's level 2, we effectively have 3 successful hits against its arms. Therefore, it will be defeated. However, these little burst icons indicate successful hits against our player. Now, each successful hit is equal to its level, which is going to be pretty beefy. That will mean each one of these starbursts here indicate 2 damage. It's a grand total of 10. But since we have power armor equipped, that will negate not 2 damage, 2 successful hits. Since each hit is worth 2 damage, we're effectively negating 4 whole damage against us. Now, enemies' damage will always apply before yours. When applying damage, you have your radiation on the left and your health on the right. We're taking 6 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If ever the red and the green are to meet each other, you are considered dead. If they are ever 1 space away, like so, you're not quite dead yet, but you have no health. If you ever take 1 more point of damage, or vice versa, one more point of radiation, you will then be considered dead and have to start over in whatever the scenario is considering the starting zone. When you die, you will reset your health to full. If you had any loot cards, they will be immediately discarded, but you will not lose anything equipped to you or any experience. However, when regaining your health, your radiation will stay the same. Now in this case, we defeated it. Since it was level 2, we will gain 2 experience points. Now if you ever fill up your experience points all the way to the L in the special, you'll immediately put that down to the beginning, draw 2 random new special traits, and oh, look at that, we got 2 of the same. But you can choose one that you do not already have and place it here. If you ever attack with a weapon that shows a special symbol that you yourself own, that means you are allowed to perform 1 free reroll and reroll any number of the dice shown. If you were ever told to test a specific stat, in this case, Endurance 3, it means you have to roll those Starburst pips an equal number or greater than the number that is listed. That E indicates that if you own the E in a special trait, then you are allowed to perform a free reroll. Next we have an encounter. In Diamond City, we can see that this encounter is a level 4 encounter. So we find the deck that is the same as that symbol and draw the top card. The player to your right will read the flavor text and will read the options, but only the options. The player will then choose which option they want to perform, and then based on that option, the player to the right that is reading the card will continue to tell them what happens. In this case, there is a test. If you succeed, you gain the top succeed part. If you fail, you suffer the fail. If a card ever says trash at the end of it, that means discard it from the game. It will no longer be used. However, if there is no trash, you simply add it to the bottom of the deck to be used again later. Our next available action is the quest action, which means you can perform this quest icon on this quest if you meet the requirements. Perform a quest action at the Super Mutant Camp. It then tells you to draw and fight a humanoid creature. Once you are done, you go to claim your rewards, and then add a new card to the deck. And then the last action you are allowed to perform is camp. When you camp, you recover 3 health. You can also unexhaust exhausted cards. Sometimes cards have requirements in order to unexhaust them. In this case, we have to pay a cap. You are also allowed to trade with any other player that are within 1 space away from you when performing a camp action. Now there's a few different stipulations here, such as you cannot perform an encounter, a quest, or a trade, or a camp in general if there are enemies in your space. But there are no penalties for moving away from an enemy. So if you have to, you can get the heck out of Dodge and then perform a camp action to recover some health. Be careful where you camp though, because sometimes the enemies will follow you. And this is how we're going to do that. After all players have fulfilled their turns, the first player will flip the top agenda card. And then you will find all of the symbols on the bottom of this agenda card, which will indicate which type of creatures will activate and or attack. The star indicates the faction that shares the star symbol. And then we have the humanoid creatures. Now, if you have face-up humanoid characters, those will activate first, in which case they will simply move one space closer to the closest available player. Now, if there's an equal distance between players, the activated enemy will choose to go after the person that has the least amount of health. If there is still a tie, they will go towards the player that comes first in player order. Now, all creatures or enemies will activate in this same manner and move one space closer. If, for instance, they started within range of an attack, instead of moving, they will perform an attack that works the exact same way as if a player were to take the attack action. All 3 VETS dice are rolled. The player can re-roll any of them as they see fit based on their special stats and cards used. Any starburst symbols will count as successful hits against the player, and any VATS targeting icons will be used as successful hits against that enemy. After all damage is resolved, we move on to the next enemy. After all activated enemies have performed their action, we go on to the inactive enemies, where they simply flip face up and are now available for a future activation. After you have activated all of that symbol, you move on to the next symbol from left to right. And when all enemies of those chosen symbols have activated, the agenda card will get discarded, and the next round will start. Now, the first player is easily identified as the player that has the agenda deck. Once all of the cards have been used and discarded, and now require a shuffling, this deck will get pushed to the player to your right, who will then become the new first player. Couple specialty rules we need to go over. The star tokens and the shield tokens based on the factions that are on the game board are always considered enemies. However, if you have an agenda card with the star or the shield symbol in the top left, you can flip that face up. Instead of keeping your agenda card hidden, you flip that face up to prove your loyalty to that faction, meaning they are no longer enemies to you, they will no longer activate and come towards you, and you can no longer fight them. However, there are some main quests that require those tokens to be fought. So you have to pick and choose which faction you want to join, based on the agenda cards in your hand and how much influence you can strategically win over your opponents. Another thing we should go over, when you level up and get to choose a new special stat to add to your player board, if you choose one that you already own, you instead can choose a perk card. Now, when choosing a perk card, you have to choose the ones, or you can choose from the ones of the stat that you have specifically chosen. If I already had an S for strength, and I chose to keep the S from my level up, well, I already have one. So instead, I can find the 2 S perks, read them, choose among one of them, or choose one among them, and keep it in my player board area to be used at a later time. And lastly, we have the shop. Now, when you perform an encounter that tells you to shop, you can buy, sell, and recruit as you see fit. First, move everything to the right and add a 5th card. Now, all cards have a value in the top right. All cards you have in your hand also have a value in the top right. If you wish to sell them, you will sell it for one less than its value is listed as, and it'll get added to the discard pile. Now you can continue to buy or sell, or if there is a companion listed in that, or if there's a companion listed, you can recruit. Add these things to your inventory or your companion slot on your player board, and they can be used at a later time. Now, if you recruit or purchase, the shop will stay just as empty as it was when you purchased it. Because when you are done shopping, everything will move over towards the right and refill until there are 4 available shop cards. Whether you're shopping or a card specifically tells you to take a card from the shop, at the end of that action is when the shop itself will refresh. Now the game comes with 2 books. One is the Learn to Play and one is the Rules Reference, which goes into greater detail on all the different aspects of the game. My favorite part of that is it's got a nice little cheat sheet on the back. I know I went over quite a bit of information. The game itself seems like it might be difficult, but I rate this at about a 2.5 out of complexity out of 5. It might take a little bit to get used to. The quest lines might get a little muddy because as you continue playing the game, several cards are available to quest on. And then depending on where you place them on the table, people are constantly going to be asking, well, what's that quest? What's that? But anyway, the game itself is fantastic, and I think it does play pretty true to the actual Fallout series. It gives you an open world that you can explore, fight random enemies, have a quest line, gain some power, buy new items, get some companions to fight alongside you. But ultimately, your influence is what makes you the winner. That's how much you've influenced the environment around you, what you've decided to do, what paths you chose during your quest. I think that freedom to choose is one of my favorite aspects of this game. I hope you enjoy this game as much as me, and I hope you have a great night.